With all the gaming discussion videos I've been doing lately, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you guys forgot that I even talk about albums on this channel. Welcome back to 10 Years Later, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. And yes, as I like to do on this series, it's time for a video that I'm kind of only making just to remind you guys that this artist existed. Because as you can tell by the title, the album that we'll be talking about today is the 2010 Mike Posner album, 31 Minutes to Takeoff. Mike Posner, singer, songwriter, rapper from Detroit, Michigan. Back in 2010, he was making some pretty huge waves. Originally, he was a record producer that worked with names such as Big Sean, and even made his own mixtapes with the help of Don Cannon and DJ Benzi. While he initially created very hip-hop centric projects, he was also known for mixing other stylings of pop, folk, and R&B into his music. And with this record, he became a bit of an overnight sensation with his hit song Cooler Than Me, which peaked in the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100. The record was also home to a couple other songs that peaked around the top 15 or 20 on the Hot 100. These days it seems he's settled more into a background role, writing music for artists like Justin Bieber, Maroon 5, Pharrell Williams, Chainz, Nick Jonas, T.I., just to name a couple. Though he did have one more big hit in 2016's I Took a Pill in Ibiza. With this record though, he was seemingly on top of the world. And given that he mostly disappeared after it, I kind of wondered why. The record is 12 tracks in 38 minutes, which isn't too long. That's a pretty standard length for a record like this. But unfortunately, in my return to the album, maybe I can see after listening to this why Mike Posner disappeared so quickly. And even though his genre mixing seemed ambitious, I kind of see him as a pretty limited artist after listening to this record. I know, it was his debut album, so naturally it's going to be a bit rough around the edges, but still, this record didn't inspire too much confidence for me. Interestingly, despite his hip-hop influence and come up, much of Mike's debut album moves away from that hip-hop direction, leaning more into the electro-pop realm that was very popular in the early 2010s. I've talked about it before, but so many artists were dominating the charts with electro-pop, and Mike Posner just happened to be another one of those artists. While he noted that he was interested in making something that didn't sound like anything else that was out, I wouldn't really say this sounds too different from what the musical landscape sounded like in 2010. The title track is a forlorn minute-long opener that consists of Mike singing a quick verse over some light pianos, and it leads into Please Don't Go, which is a somewhat emotional, light electronic track that I think does sound reminiscent of a lot of what was popular back then. It's still pretty catchy with understated but still smooth vocals and some nice twists in its synth instrumentals. And the aforementioned Cooler Than Me was a song that I really enjoyed back in the early 2010s, probably more than I wanted to admit, and I still enjoy it. The somewhat booming electronic production wasn't anything new at the time, but a little bombast does actually help Mike a bit on the song, especially given some of the other tracks on here that don't nearly have the same amount of energy. And his almost raspy vocals actually do sound great as he delivers some of the catchiest vocal melodies on the album. The track Deja Vu features none other than Boyz II Men, and this song feels like a nice move away from the electro-pop sounds into the world of R&B. Boyz II Men doesn't contribute a ton to the track on vocals, but fortunately, Mike sounds great on his own. The beat has this great relaxed vibe with some good bounce to it, and it gives him a bit more freedom to showcase his talents. Really though, that's about it when it comes to highlights for me. The problem with the album is that so much of it just blends together too quickly, and I think that's what holds it back from being an interesting listen. Bow Chicka Wow Wow feels like it was cut from some of the same cloth as Please Don't Go, and even though Mike's vocals aren't bad, they're just not all that exciting to me, and the instrumental doesn't do too much other than feature a few cool guitars. Do You Wanna has one of the most clever instrumentals on the album, thanks largely to the very smooth horns, but Mike feels kind of puny here, and the chorus gets too repetitive too quickly. Also, Cheated, what I would probably call the fuckboy anthem of 2010, might honestly be the worst track here. Beyond its pretty standard electronic instrumental, it's by far the most gross song on the album lyrically. You can see it here. Mike basically admits that he should have cheated on his girlfriend and refers to her as a whore, which leads to my friendly reminder now that cheating is not okay, please don't do it. Also, Mike makes himself look less like a charming personality and more like a douchebag when he literally mentions his ex-girlfriend's name on the song. I won't say it in the video, but I hope she doesn't have to deal with people constantly bringing this song up to her. Also, Gone in September has an appearance from the man himself, Mr. Travis Barker of Blink-182 fame. The song continues to have a bit of the fuckboy themes of Cheated, but to a slightly less abhorrent degree. At least here, Mike sounds like he has some sort of self-awareness. The one thing that saves it from being one of the worst songs on the album is the instrumental, which thanks largely to Travis's presence, feels a bit reminiscent of some of Blink-182's material. Say Your Goodbyes fortunately moves away from those douchebaggy fuckboy themes a good bit, but unfortunately, the instrumental on this one just really bored me. While it does have an emotional vibe to it, it doesn't really stand out from much of what else is here, and it's just another in one ear and out the other kind of song. Synthesizer also bored me too. There were a few cool effects on the production here, but aesthetically, there's nothing much that makes the song all that memorable. It lacks much in the way of catchiness, cleverness, or excitement, and without a strong hook, the song stales out very fast. Delta 1406 is thematically one of the most interesting songs on the album, as it deals with the ways that Fame has Mike going through the motions and being upset that Fame isn't all it's cracked up to be. Almost a precursor to some of the themes that he would discuss on I Took a Pill in Ibiza years later. Lyrically, it's a great track, but I just wish the production was as interesting as the writing. The beat has this light, hazy vibe, which I don't think does a strong enough job of portraying just how much the Fame has affected him. I respect the song in that it was really personal to Mike, and I think it is an interesting autopsy on Mike's life since becoming famous, but I just wish it had a better instrumental behind it. Though it honestly would have been a better closer than Falling, which, beyond carrying that samey sound and production to it, and once again carrying a hook that probably couldn't have taken more than a few minutes to create, ends up feeling like a bridge to nowhere. The song twists in a couple different directions, being light at a few moments and busy in some others, but it never reaches a destination where it actually blends together harmoniously. It's just bare and boring and a lackluster finish to the album. Overall, this record doesn't really do all that much for me. Mike moves away from his hip-hop sounds to go for something poppier, which on the surface isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the problem is that very few of the tracks on the album stick out. Despite Mike initially trying to assure us that his sound was very different, nothing here comes across to me as being that unique. Vocally, Mike often feels like he doesn't do much on these songs. His writing can be absolutely hideous at points, and the instrumentals feel like empty space. The best thing I could say for the album is that there are a few highlights, but otherwise it just feels like white noise. It doesn't sound like a future star on the rise to me. It sounds like someone hearing a lot of what was popular, taking out anything that could have made that sound and style unique, and slapping his name onto it. It's not the most horrid thing in the world, but I don't think I can make a case that it's some forgotten gem of the last decade either. Maybe you might get some enjoyment out of revisiting it if it's tied to some of your own nostalgic memories, but otherwise, there's not really much that I can say about it other than that it's just very forgettable. Back in 2010, I did listen to Cooler Than Me a decent bit, and a part of me feels like I might have enjoyed at least some of this record, but listening to it now, I can't say that I really care all that much for it. If I had to put it on my scale, I would probably give it a bad rating. It's not the worst thing I've heard, but it really does almost nothing exciting, and sadly, I can definitely see why Mike Posner ended up becoming a forgotten relic of the 2010s. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back then? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it? Do you have a lot of fond memories with it? Did you hate it? And do you have bad memories with it? Do you still love it? Do you still hate it? Are you completely indifferent to it? Do you even know who Mike Posner is anymore? Whatever your thoughts are, leave them down in the comments. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I'm not going to beg you for it. As for what's next, this is probably going to be a pretty exciting one for some because the next album on my list is Katy Perry's Teenage Dream. Easily one of the biggest albums of 2010. That one will probably come later in the month because originally it released late in August. But with how popular the album was, I will absolutely be talking about it, so stay tuned for that. But until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.